The music was playing. The lights were warm. My husband squeezed my hand and whispered, "We did it." That's when my sister screamed. Not cried. Not complained. Screamed. "I can't believe you're doing this to me." Every head in the reception hall turned. My sister, Maya, stood in the middle of the dance floor, face red, mascara running, throwing her clutch onto the table like a weapon. My parents rushed to her side instantly. "What happened?" my mom asked, panicked. Maya pointed at me. "At her." "She didn't let me make a speech first," Maya sobbed. "She didn't center me. This day is humiliating." I laughed at first. I honestly thought it was a joke. It wasn't. My dad grabbed the microphone from the DJ. "Everyone," he said loudly, "we need to pause for a moment. Family emergency." Pause. At my wedding. Guests shifted uncomfortably. My husband looked at me, confused. The cake sat untouched behind us. Maya collapsed into a chair, wailing dramatically. And my parents did what they'd always done. They chose her. My mom turned to me and said, sharp and urgent, "Can you just apologize so she can calm down?" Apologize. At my wedding reception. For what? I whispered. For upsetting your sister, my dad snapped. You know how she is. Then he said the sentence that cracked something open inside me. This isn't the time to make everything about you. Something went quiet in my chest. Because in that moment, I realized. This wasn't about the reception. This wasn't about a tantrum. This was about a lifetime of being asked to shrink. Even on the one day that was supposed to belong to me. And as the DJ shut off the music and guests began murmuring, I leaned over to my husband and whispered something that shocked him. "I'm ready," I said. He looked at me. And nodded. Because my parents thought they'd ruined my reception. What they didn't know was this. They had just given me the perfect reason. To disappear. We didn't make a scene. That was the strangest part. While my parents hovered over Maya, stroking her hair, whispering reassurances like she was the bride, we slipped away. My husband took my hand. I picked up my bouquet. We walked past the gift table like guests heading for fresh air. No one stopped us. Because no one was looking at us. Outside, the night air felt sharp and real. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for years. "You sure?" my husband asked gently. I nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. We got into the car we'd planned to drive to the hotel after the reception. Instead, he pulled out of the parking lot and kept going. My phone buzzed almost immediately. "Mom, where did you go?" "Dad, this is inappropriate." "Maya, you're ruining everything." I turned the phone face down. "I don't want my wedding night to be about managing her feelings," I said. "Or theirs." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "Then it won't be." 2 hours later, we checked into a quiet inn under a different last name. No relatives. No drama. Just us. That's when the messages changed. "Mom, come back. People are asking questions." "Dad, you embarrassed the family." "Not are you okay?" "Not congratulations. Just reputation management." I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and realized something heavy and freeing. They didn't destroy my reception. They revealed exactly who they were. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush back to fix it. Because disappearing wasn't running away. It was finally choosing where I belonged. By morning, my phone had over 30 missed calls. Voicemails stacked on top of each other like accusations. My mom crying. My dad angry. My aunt demanding explanations. Not one message said, "Congratulations." We packed our bags quietly and drove farther than planned. Changed our route. Checked into another hotel by the coast, somewhere calm, anonymous, ours. That's when I did something I'd never done before. I blocked them. Not forever. Just enough to breathe. My husband watched me hesitate before hitting the button. "You don't owe anyone access," he said. The silence that followed was unsettling at first. No buzzing. No tension. No anticipating the next demand. Just waves. Coffee. Sleep. 3 days later, I checked my email. A long message from my parents. They were hurt. They were confused. They were embarrassed. They blamed stress. They blamed Maya's mental health. They blamed me for abandoning family when they needed unity. Not once did they acknowledge what they'd done. I closed the laptop. That night, my husband asked gently, "What happens when we go back?" I thought about my wedding dress hanging untouched at home. The cake we never cut. The guests who watched my parents choose my sister again. "We don't go back to the same place," I said. "We build somewhere new." He smiled. "Then let's do that." And that's when it hit me. I hadn't vanished to punish them. I vanished to protect the life I was starting. Because if they couldn't respect me on my wedding day, they would never respect the marriage that followed. And I was done letting my sister's tantrums decide the shape of my future. We came home a week later. Not to apologies. Not to accountability. To a story my parents had already told everyone. Apparently, I was overwhelmed. Too emotional. Maya had a panic attack and needed support. And I had stormed out like a child. I found out when a cousin called and said, "Your parents were just trying to keep the peace." The peace. The word that had swallowed my entire childhood. I went to my parents' house alone that afternoon. My husband stayed back, not because he was afraid, but because this was something I had to finish myself. My mom opened the door with red eyes. "Oh, thank God," she said. "We've been so worried." "About me?" I asked. She hesitated. "About the situation." My dad sat in his chair, arms crossed. Maya wasn't there. "I want to be clear," I said calmly. "I didn't leave because I was dramatic. I left because you took my wedding and handed it to my sister." My dad scoffed. "That's not fair." "She was having a breakdown. And I was getting married," I replied. Why was her breakdown more important than my once-in-a-lifetime moment? Silence. Then my mom said it, the line she thought would end the conversation. "You know Maya needs us more than you do." Something in me settled. "No," I said quietly. "She just demands you more. And you reward it." My dad snapped back, "So what, you expect us to abandon her?" I shook my head. "No. I expected you not to abandon me." They had no answer for that. Because the truth was too clear to twist. And as I stood to leave, I realized this wasn't a fight anymore. It was a boundary. One they'd never had to face before. The phone calls didn't stop after that visit. They escalated. My mom left voicemails that swung between guilt and grief. My dad sent long texts about family values. Relatives I barely spoke to suddenly had opinions. Everyone agreed on one thing. I needed to be the bigger person. I recognized the pattern immediately. Bigger person was just code for go back to being quiet. One evening, my mom called while my husband and I were making dinner. I put her on speaker. "Your sister is devastated," she said. "She feels like you abandoned her." I didn't raise my voice. "I left my wedding reception," I replied. "She still has both parents, endless attention, and zero consequences." "That's not fair," my dad cut in. "She's fragile." I finally said what I'd never been allowed to say before. "And I'm done being breakable so she can stay fragile." Silence. Then my mom tried again. "So what do you want from us?" I took a breath. "I want accountability," I said. "I want you to admit that what you did was wrong. And I want it to never happen again." My dad scoffed. "We're not apologizing for protecting our child." That was the moment it became clear. They weren't confused. They weren't unaware. They were choosing. Then this is how it's going to be, I said calmly. No visits. No holidays. No access to my marriage, until you can treat me like I matter. My mom started crying. My dad called me dramatic. I ended the call. My husband wrapped his arms around me, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt steady. Because boundaries aren't ultimatums. They're information. And now my parents finally had all of it. What they did next would decide everything. The first holiday passed without them. No dramatic doorstep visit. No surprise calls. No just checking in. Nothing. At first, I braced myself, waiting for the backlash, the smear campaign, the emotional ambush. It didn't come. And that's when I understood something unsettling. They weren't giving me space out of respect. They were waiting me out. Waiting for guilt to do what they couldn't. My sister posted photos online, family dinners, smiling faces, captions about holding loved ones close. My parents were there. Front and center. Happy. I wasn't mentioned. Not once. My husband saw me scrolling and gently took the phone from my hand. You're not being punished, he said. You're being replaced. That hurt more than anger ever could. Weeks later, my mom finally texted. We miss you. Your sister is struggling. Can we just move on? Move on. No apology. No accountability. Just erase and repeat. I typed slowly. We can move forward after you acknowledge what happened and commit to never doing it again. The reply came hours later. You're making this too hard. I stared at the screen and felt something click into place. They didn't miss me. They missed the version of me that made everything easier. And I was never going back to being her. That night, my husband and I sat on the couch talking about the future, our future. Where we'd spend holidays. What kind of family we'd build. I realized something powerful. I hadn't vanished to be chased. I vanished to be free. And the consequences my parents never expected were already happening. They just hadn't felt them yet. It happened on a random Tuesday. No holiday. No anniversary. Just an ordinary day, until my mom showed up at my door. Unannounced. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, uncertain. I didn't know where else to go, she said. I didn't invite her in right away. What happened? I asked. She exhaled shakily. Your sister moved back home. I waited. She's not coping, my mom continued. She screams. She throws things. She demands everything. The words hung there. The same behavior. Now with no buffer. My dad couldn't handle it. Their routines were shattered. The peace they'd always protected was gone. She needs help, my mom whispered. And we don't know how to do this alone. I nodded slowly. You trained her to believe the world would stop for her, I said. It did, because you stopped it. My mom's eyes filled. We didn't realize. I met her gaze. You realized at my wedding. That landed. She looked around my home, calm, quiet, balanced. She saw my husband, the life we'd built without them. I want my daughter back, she said. I spoke carefully. You can't have me back by pretending nothing happened, I said. And you can't ask me to step into chaos you created. She nodded, finally understanding the cost. As she left, she said something that told me everything. You were always the easy one. I closed the door gently. Because I finally understood. Being easy had never meant being loved more. It had meant being used. And now, the consequences were unavoidable. They were living with them. Not to manage. Not to rescue. Not to absorb the chaos they created. And that was the consequence they never planned for. My parents had built a world where my sister's emotions ran everything. and my silence made it possible. When I vanished from that role, the system collapsed. Not because I was cruel. Because I was essential. Weeks later, my parents sent a letter. Not defensive. Not dramatic. Honest. They admitted what they'd done at my wedding. They admitted they'd trained me to shrink. They admitted they didn't know how to face my sister without me. I didn't rush to forgive. But I didn't dismiss it either. Because accountability isn't about instant reunion. It's about changed behavior, over time. My husband and I renewed our vows quietly on a beach months later. No parents. No sister. Just witnesses who loved us. That day felt like the wedding we were meant to have. I didn't disappear to hurt them. I disappeared with clarity. With boundaries. With dignity. With the life I chose. And that was the real consequence. They lost the daughter who made everything easier. I gained the woman who finally chose herself.